Stanley lay across his bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. His phone buzzed beside him, lighting up with notifications from friends and admirers. Just months ago, he would have responded to every message, charming and smooth-talking his way through the throng of girls vying for his attention. Now, all he felt was a growing pit of dread in his stomach. Nmesoma's death had turned his once vibrant world into a suffocating cage. It had been 3 months since the fateful day in the clinic, but the memories clung to him like a shadow he couldn't shake. He had tried to move on, to bury his guilt under the rubble of his old habits. He would scroll through his contacts, looking for another girl to distract him, to give him a fleeting sense of normalcy. He longed to return to the thrill of the chase, the rush of feeling desired and admired. But every time he tried to dial a number, his fingers froze over the screen. He would see Nmesoma's face, pale and lifeless, and hear her voice echoing in his mind. "You promised to love me, Stanley. What did you do? What did you give me instead?" No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't bring himself to entertain another girl. The idea of touching someone else filled him with revulsion. He had always been the one to toy with others' emotion, the one to take and never give. But now, for the first time in his life, he felt powerless. It was as though Nmesoma's spirit had shackled him to a prison of his own making. His friends noticed the change in him. Gone was the charming playboy who dominated every room he entered. In his place was a hollow-out shell of a man, eyes sunken in, clothes disheveled, and movements sluggish. "You need to get back out there, Stan," his friend coolly advised one evening, handing him a drink. "Just pick a girl, any girl. It will help you get over all of this." Stanley nodded absently, clutching the glass, but he knew he couldn't do it. He couldn't escape the haunting image of Nmesoma's eyes, filled with the trust he had shattered. And then, as if on cue, the whispers started. It began innocently enough, just faint murmurs in the back of his mind. "Stanley," they would call out softly, dragging his name through the darkness of his thoughts. He would sit up abruptly, his eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of the voice. But he was always alone. "You are losing it," he muttered to himself, rubbing his temples in frustration. He threw himself into distractions. He frequented bars, drank until the world blurred around him, and laughed so loudly at jokes that weren't even funny. But no amount of alcohol or parties could drown out the whispers. They followed him everywhere, at lectures, in the cafeteria, on his way back to his apartment late at night. It was always her voice, that soft, haunting melody that grew louder and more insistent with each passing day. "Why, Stanley? Why did you betray me?" the voice would say. He tried to fight back, to curse at the shadows in his room. He shouted into empty air, demanding the voice to leave him alone. But it only grew stronger, creeping into every corner of his mind. His grades began to slip, and his professors pulled him aside, concerned about his erratic behavior. "I'm fine," he would snap at them, brushing off their worry with a feigned confidence. But inside, he was unraveling. One night, he finally gathered the courage to call up a girl he had once flirted with at a campus. It was a party, and her name was Anita, a fun, carefree spirit who had always been eager for his attention. "Meet me at the bar tonight," he texted her, his fingers trembling over the keypad. He needed to prove himself that he was still Stanley, the king of campus, the heartbreaker. That evening, he forced himself into his best shirt, splashed cologne over his neck, and looked at his reflection in the mirror. For a brief moment, he almost convinced himself that he was back to his old self. He flashed a practiced smirk, adjusted his collar, and headed out the door. The bar was alive with music and chatter, the air thick with the scent of alcohol and sweat. He spotted Anita at the table, waving at him with a bright smile. For a second, he felt a surge of confidence. "This is it," he thought. "I can do this." But as he approached the table, he froze. There, sitting beside Anita, was a girl with a long hair, dressed in white. She turned to face him, and his heart stopped. It was Nmesoma. Her eyes were hollow, her lips twisted with a haunting smile. "Stanley," she whispered, though the music around him was deafening. "No, no," he stumbled back, clutching his head. He blinked, and she was gone. Anita looked at him, concern etched on her face. "Stan, are you okay?" she asked, reaching out to touch his arm. But he recoiled. The image of Nmesoma burned into his mind. I can't," he stammered, turning and fleeing from the bar, leaving Anita bewildered and alone. From that night on, the hauntings escalated. He could no longer distinguish reality from his nightmares. In the mirrors, Nmesoma's face appeared, her eyes bloodshot and accusing. "You took my life, Stanley," her reflection hissed. "Now, I will take yours." His apartment became a prison of moving shadows, flickering lights, and doors that slammed shut on their own. Sleep eluded him. When he did manage to drift off, he was haunted by visions of Nmesoma on the operating table, reaching out to him with blood hands. He would wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air, his heart pounding against his ribcage. Please make it stop," he cried out into the darkness. "I'm sorry." His friends, noticing his deteriorating state, grew concerned but also wary. "Something's not right with him," they whispered among themselves. Some distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the madman Stanley was becoming. Others tried to help, suggesting pastors, spiritual healers, and therapists. But Stanley refused, convinced that no one could save him from the hell he had created. His paranoia grew. He stopped going out during the day, afraid of the shadows that seemed to stalk him. He boarded up his windows, covered his mirrors, and locked himself inside his apartment. His life became a cycle of fear, hallucinations, and regrets. Whenever he closed his eyes, he heard her voice, mocking him, reminding him of his sins. See those girls out there, Stanley? Her voice whispered one day as he stared out through the crack in his curtains. You can't have them. You will never have anyone else again. He wanted to scream, to curse, to break free of the torment that gripped his mind. But he was trapped. His own guilt had manifested into a relentless ghost that gnawed at his sanity. Days blurred into nights, and soon he found himself talking to the shadows, pleading with Nmesoma to leave him alone. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, he chanted, rocking back and forth on the floor, tears streaming down his face. Weeks later, he hit rock bottom. His body was gaunt, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He had become a recluse, a ghost of the charming boy he once was. On a stormy night, as thunder roared outside, he stood in his living room, clutching a broken bottle in his hand. I'll end this, he screamed, raising the bottle towards his throat. Do it, Nmesoma's voice echoed. Do it and end your misery, Stanley. He hesitated, his hand trembling violently. And then he saw her, standing in the corner of the room, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes two empty voids. Do it, Stanley, she urged, stepping closer. Feel what it's like to lose everything. With a loud cry, he dropped the bottle, collapsing to his knees. No, I can't. I can't. Nmesoma's figure loomed above him, her presence cold and suffocating. Then suffer, she hissed, vanishing into the shadows once more. From that night, Stanley lost all touch with reality. He wandered the campus grounds, muttering to himself, eyes darting around as if searching for unseen entities. His friends abandoned him. His family took him back home, but nothing could get rid of the haunting. His mind spiraled into madness, and soon he was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, the whispers of Nmesoma forever echoing in the corners of his fractured mind. The campus spoke of his story in hushed tones, a tale of deceit, loss, and the terrible price of taking love for granted. Stanley, the once charismatic player, was now a broken man, haunted by the ghost of his own sins, doomed to wander the maze of his shadowed psyche for eternity. And somewhere in the silence of the hospital's dimly lit halls, Nmesoma's voice lingered, a reminder of a love destroyed, a life taken too soon, and a heart that would never find peace.